Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, David.
Awake and ready?
Awake and ready.
Great. Let us go within and find that place within the heart. Ramana Maharshi said that the soul resides in the heart about the size of a thumb. That is a yoti, or a light that is there. And when we put our concentration there at the heart, we can feel our connection with the one infinite consciousness. Now, in the beginning, it doesn't start out that way. But always we can feel a certain presence there, a certain consciousness. Most oftentimes, when people say I and they point to themselves, they unconsciously or consciously point towards their heart. This is me. This is who I have been. When I was born, when I was young, when I was growing up through the years, this is me. And this is to be found here at the heart center. It is said by Master and Mother that we can focus the attention on the heart center, on the ajna, or the point between the eyebrows, and the sahasrara, or the crown chakra at the top of the head. Now, when spiritual experiences come to you, they will spontaneously take you into these different areas of focus. We should feel that the life energy is streaming up through the spine. And as it streams up through the spine, it comes to the heart center. And as it rises beyond the heart center, it comes to the fifth chakra, the place at the back of the throat. And there we might experience truth. And then we rise on up and we come to the Christ center. Now, as we go through these experiences, these upper chakras contain both the material or the man, the Son of Man, and the spiritual or the Son of God. And we come to that sixth center and we see that blaze of light. We hear that wonderful sound of Om. And these are carriers, light and sound of this nature, are both carriers that take us all the way into the formless, beginningless, endless consciousness of God. This is why Master came. This is why Mother taught, was to make us experience these higher forms of consciousness, to so purify the mind, the heart, that we should know that we are one with the Infinite Father, Divine Mother. And through that, we might merge our beings into theirs and theirs into ours. And that there will be no difference, no differentiation whatsoever. This is the end point of what we strive for, what we work for, what we should always keep our minds upon. We're approaching March 7th, which is the Mahasamadhi date of Master. And years before his leaving, he had been talking about that Divine Mother might take him at any time. In fact, at one time he said he negotiated with Divine Mother that his time had been earlier. Now, this isn't entirely unusual for highly realized beings. Ramatirtha left the body when he was 33. Great Vivekananda left the body when he was barely 40. Ramakrishna was in his early 50s, and so on. And many times it is because these great masters carry a burden, or it is simply the divine design, their time to be able to accomplish what they were meant to accomplish, and then to leave this earth. You see, when you come into a state of higher realization, you come to the awareness that this body is just simply a vehicle. Now, it's a very personal vehicle because we have sensory connection with it. So we feel its pleasures, we feel its pains, unlike perhaps an automobile, although through sympathy we can sometimes feel pain or ecstasy with our automobiles. That's true. But this body is a very intimate instrument. So much so that we come to identify ourselves with it. Our consciousness does not oftentimes go back to the very point of birth, but some earlier point in our life of our earliest memories. And through that thought, through that memory, we come to identify and say, I am this body. I don't know who I am without it. And in not original Christianity, but later Christianity, came to identify that this body would rise out of the ground, the very bones, the song, these bones will rise again. The thought is, that is what inspired being buried by the early Christians rather than cremated or other things, is the idea that when the Christ should come again, the bones themselves should form again a body, that there should be skin, I guess, and all the other kinds of things that we are used to, and that would become our new body. It is the materialization, the concretization of the teachings. And this is not what is meant by the second coming. Master has written so beautifully and spoken so beautifully about the second coming. And the second coming is the Christ come again out of the clouds of heaven. But Jesus himself said that God and the kingdom of heaven are within you. And therefore, the clouds of heaven are not the clouds, the white puffy things that are up in the sky, water vapor. He does not come out of those clouds, but rather here at the ajna, the point between the eyebrows. It is there as we concentrate, that the Christ comes again. We see the great light of Christ. We hear his footsteps through the sound of Om. And there are many other sounds. I remember one time in deep meditation when I heard this tremendous sound of the bumblebee. It's a deep droning sound. And so you hear different things as you ascend up the spinal ladder until you come into that Christ consciousness, and there you hear the Om, and you see the beautiful deep blue light of Christ consciousness, or the gold aura of the Om, or the pure pearlescent type light of pure divinity, God without form, the Heavenly Father. And then you ascend. You ascend from the ajna and you ascend up into the top of your head. And consciousness gets transferred there. And you feel as if there is a funnel at the top of your head, and spirit is pouring out into all eternity. It does not harm you. It does not harm you in any way at all. It brings you into a complete state of rest, and there is just enough life force to keep this body functioning. And as you reside in that pure essence of God, God the Father, you are ascending. Now, in most cases, people ascend and then they descend back into the body. And when they descend back into the body, they lose that connection with God. But by going over the top, you merge your whole self into your God self. And then when you return, it is not you returning back into human consciousness, but it is God taking human form. It is a vast transformation that happens. You are no longer a simple individual who is striving for God. You are God living his life. Now, this has always been true. And we may have known that in theory, but not in practice. And in the beginning, we may get hints of it. We may get times when we feel God's thought flowing through our mind, his life energy flowing through our bodies, his feelings flowing through our hearts. And we no longer feel that our life is our own. It is pure God. And then that experience will come and it will go. And it will come again and it will go. And this is part of the purification process. And if we stay true to our path, if we go all the way, we will come to that point where there is no more going out and coming in, as it talks about in the scriptures. But we are now merged in God, and God is merged in us. Man has become God, God has become man. Now, this may sound sacrilegious to some, and it is not a thing of an ego. In fact, it's quite the opposite, because ego is now transcended, and it is pure divinity, pure God who is manifesting. And it doesn't always mean that we're in some rarefied state, unconnected with this earth. No, we're manifesting on this earth. We manifest through the body, through the senses even. But it is pure God, pure divinity that is now manifesting in this body. And it does so with a purpose, because it is here to serve. It enjoys God's presence. It enjoys God living his life in this world. But there is never a time when we act separately from divine consciousness. We could if we chose to. And this would be a fall, the same fall that Adam and Eve experienced when they went from their divine communion with God into a state of separation. And we see the natural consequences of what comes about: fear, jealousy, even the rage to kill a brother. These are all natural outcomes of becoming separated from God. Now we have made a complete circle. We did leave God. We did journey out from Him. We suffered and experienced all the pleasure that that can bring. And we realize that this life is nothing if we do not have God. This is a great time to come to, and yet it produces a great pain in us. As we're coming towards Master's Mahasamadhi, March 7th, and Sri Yukteswar on March 9th, it's a wonderful time to remember these great masters. And when Master left his body, he entered into that state of Mahasamadhi. I described that funnel at the top of the head. And when the time comes and you're fully conscious of God, then God chooses when to take you. You may have foreknowledge of that or not, depending on God's will. And there are some who say that Master was hinting that he was going to be leaving the body when he did. And it is nice to think that he had foreknowledge, but it doesn't take away from his realization if he did not. I remember when I was up at Dwarahat near Babaji's cave, and Master's description had not been quite right. The cave, as it is designated today, is not in the same place on the same mountaintop where Master had said, and I was talking to a brahmachari who was there. He said, well, Master could travel here by astral means, and he could see where it was, and he didn't make any mistakes. I thought, well, that's true. All of that is true. And possibly true about Master, but he had never physically gone there. And perhaps he could make a mistake. You see, this is something that Mother gave to us, is that even when God is manifesting through a human form, that form can seemingly make mistakes. It can misspeak, it can misstate things. What it never does is misspeaks the truth of God. There may be certain facts, but there is an attunement with God that if God is speaking through that one, then that one will speak the truth as God is expressing himself through them. Mother would say that sometimes Master spoke the most beautiful English, most beautiful, and we know that that's true. It's poetry, its way of expression, absolutely fantastic. And then, Mother would say, there were times when he would murder the King's English. And I've read his original transcripts of his talks. And it's not always well expressed. Sometimes it's a bit confusing because he leaves out words or even sometimes sentences that connect thoughts together. But Mother said that even when he seemingly misspoke, oftentimes she experienced some great insight. You know, sometimes if a writing or something is too smooth, it doesn't stick with us, but if there's something unique about it, then we experience it in a different way and our brain engages with it a different way. And sometimes it can trigger different associations with us. And it may be a significant moment. So we should not discount the Master's expression. Now, as Master stood on the stage and he was welcoming the ambassador, the new ambassador from India. And this is quite a thing, you know, because all the time that Master had grown up there, they had been a British colony. And here they had, through very hard work and led by Mahatma Gandhi, gained their independence in 1947. And so here was the ambassador. And the ambassador seemed to really love Yogananda, and so did the ambassador's wife. And he had a good feeling towards them. And so he was giving a speech. And of course, as we know, Master could be quite funny. And during the talk, he talked about how when he first came to America, he had heard how Indians, unfortunately, with Christopher Columbus and those after him, there's a confusion. The reason Native Americans are called Indians is because originally they thought they were in India. And of course, this is completely wrong. The master thought that it indicated there is a karmic connection between America and India, that this connection had stayed. Anyway, he had heard about how Indians scalped their victims once they were done with them, taking off their scalps. And so he was walking along the streets and he saw these men who were bald walking along on the street. And he thought, there, the Indians have been at work. They've lost all their hair, an unusual phenomenon in India. And so, of course, he got a great laugh out of this. And then he was talking about my India, my America. But he is closing with a poem about my India, a beautiful poem, where he had been blessed that his feet had touched that sod, that holy sod. And as he was repeating the last words, he suddenly turned to his right. Now, there have been different yogis, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Pranabananda, among just two, who, when they left the body, they stood up and they turned around 3 times and then sat down, performed a Kriya breath, and went completely out of the body in full consciousness, left the body just like that. Isn't that wonderful? Master was already standing and he's started to turn right. And then perhaps he is anxious to get to his Heavenly Father, but he didn't complete the 3 turns, nor did he sit down. His body just collapsed right there, right in the middle of giving a speech in front of a whole room full of people. And as you can imagine, there was shock, and then there was confusion. And some of the monks from Mount Washington, they had been placed at a table way in the back. And they made their way forward, and they had thought to themselves, perhaps Master has simply gone into samadhi and left body consciousness. They had seen him do it before. And so they started rubbing his soles of his feet and chanting Om, as he had taught them to do. This is one way to bring a yogi who is in very, very, very deep meditation, a consciousness. This is what Mother did to resurrect a saint who had left the body and had been dead for several days. And she rubbed his feet and called his name, and he came back to life. So they were hoping that perhaps they could bring Master back into life, but he had fled this mortal coil once and for all. And of course, there was grief and tragedy of what was to be a happy occasion. And most amazingly, when they took his body in and the mortuary took it and did the kinds of things that the mortuary does, and they were waiting because they thought a contingent from India might be able to come, and it turned out that they were not able to procure their visas and everything that was required. But it was some 20 days or so before they got word that they were absolutely not going to be able to make it. In the meantime, they were keeping the body. And under normal circumstances, all other circumstances, during that time, the body would start to mold and decay because there is no longer any life force to drive the heart and no longer any heart to drive the blood. And the body gradually turns back into dust. But amazingly, masters did not display the normal kind of things that happen when a body is dead. He's perfectly preserved. He looked as if he had just been breathing just a moment ago. And they were in awe of this, and they actually wrote a letter verifying that this is how it was with the master. So we're very privileged to follow in the footsteps of such a great master, are we not? I wanted to read to you a few things that Mother had said about Master after his passing. And she starts, much that was in the life of Jesus, I'm sure, has been removed. The same thing happened when Master Paramahansa passed on. Everybody looked for miracles, and many miracles were found. He was seen to appear to people shortly after his death. There is even a mark of his body after he had appeared at the door of one of his very devout disciples, and she had not known that he had passed on. Yet he entered into the house, he sat on the davenport and on a pillow, and he spoke with her. And the imprint of his body was there after he had disappeared, because all of a sudden somebody came and knocked at the door, and he left just like that. And on another occasion, Mother said, just recently I was going through some of my papers. She spoke this in 1962. Just recently I was going through some of my papers, and I found a description of a vision of a dream that I had in 1956 in a motel room in Eugene, Oregon. I had been receiving things from God very greatly. He had been talking to me. And all of a sudden, I went into sort of a dreamlike state. And for the first time since the night of his Mahasamadhi, I heard the telephone ring and I heard his voice. And I was so thrilled to hear him speak that I started to cry. And I said, Master, is it really you? And he said, yes, it is. Then strangely enough, even though I was talking to him over the telephone, I could see him in vision. And I could see him as though he stood right before me. He looked very, very concerned, and he said to me, I want you to keep on receiving just as you have been. You do just as if you've been doing. I said, what do you mean, Master? Do you mean to listen to the voice of God through my intuition, to you speaking to me, and then go to the Bible and have the truth revealed to me? Yes, he said, that's what I mean. This was in 1956, mind you, before all of these things started. He said to me, you have much to go through, but you will be protected in all things and have all power over evil. And so it has been. It has been touch and go. And sometimes the forces with which I have battled have been beyond human belief, human conception. I have told not everything to anyone, believe me. Now, not everyone has to go through what I have been through. I've told you this many times before. So these things that I am telling you are the truth, but they are not to instill fear in your mind, because as I have also told you before, I had something special to go through in terms. I had to go through it in terms that would reveal the actual truth of what the Christ taught and what was revealed in here. So mine was a little different than anyone else's. Each one goes through their own crucifixion on their own cross in their own way. But it isn't just like this, believe me, although it may have some manifestations in a small way. And then in 1961, Mother said in a talk, I always remember the night that Master passed in Mahasamadhi. I was in deep meditation, and yet I was almost as though I had fallen asleep and suddenly wakened. And the vision came to me of a small church, and I can see it just as clearly as when I open my eyes. I can see all of you. All of the chairs were empty, and I sat in the back, and I sat there. Master came through the door at the rear. He was garbed in his ochre-colored robe. He walked up to the aisle and up to the platform, and he sat in an armchair. And he looked at me with his great, large eyes, and he said, you bring them in, and I will teach them. Isn't that wonderful? What wonderful experiences between guru and disciple. And absolutely, God and Guru used Mother. And we are all the beneficiaries of that. I thought in celebration of Master's life, I'd read to you a little bit of a talk that he gave. This is in June 12th, 1949. It's entitled, How to Be Blissful and Happy All of the Time. Now, isn't that something that most of us would really want? So he tells us about that. And he begins, in all human beings of this earth, down to all kinds of creatures and animals and birds, are filled with that divine love. Those that are special reflections of God. That means if there are 100 cups filled with water and they are under the moon, and if all the waters are stirred up or covered up, they do not reflect the moon. See, do you see that? 100 cups. And if they all start getting stirred up or covered up, they will not reflect the moon. But if one cup is kept open and there is no agitation in the water, then the moon is reflected fully there. So are great masters, those that are fully reflect God. That is why he said, referring to Jesus, to all those that received him, don't shut out this light. We are the sons of God. So Jesus said, my life, and he said it in the way of my meat. Now, it's very interesting that Jesus so often metaphor, and he didn't really bother to explain to the people, at least the way that it's recorded, what it was that he's saying. And we think that that is true because so oftentimes the disciples themselves were confused and divided on what exactly the master would mean. But he would talk about my meat. And master is saying, what he is saying is my life. My meat is to do the will of him that sent me and to finish my work. It means that everyone is destined to do a part of this job for God, whether a big or a small part. Everybody wants to play the king on the stage. But if everybody played king, there couldn't be a show. So there are kings and queens and servants. And the little man is also very important because he is needed in the show. So don't think you are less than anyone else. Everybody has a job, but it is because of your desires that you do not know that job God destined for you. And that is the trouble. So the best way is to tune in with God or tune in with Guru, who is one with God. Then you will know that you are on earth for a destined purpose. And when you know that purpose, you will do the will of God and the work that you are destined to finish. That's why I was telling, I have lots of work to do yet. But I am always free. I never will to live or die, because life to me is a bulge of the ocean, and death is sleep in the bosom of the ocean. But I am with the ocean always. So there is no wish of mine but to do the will of God, because your will is full of holes and imperfections. But when you tune your will with God, then you know what is right and how you should guide your will by divine will. Therefore, you must know that your first duty is to meditate upon God, to find and know him. And if you would find him, then you will know that your only meat on earth is to do the will of God, your only food, because no life is possible without God. Your heart cannot beat. You think you think food sustains you, air sustains you. You forget that the beating in the heart is responsible. Once he has wound the heart, then it has to beat 60 years. There is a thought in yoga that each person has a destiny. And at the moment of birth, there are so many breaths that are to be taken in that lifetime. And 60 years is one of the hallmarks that is spoken of. 120 years is another. but that you have so many breaths to take in this life. It's an interesting notion, isn't it? And to think that from the very beginning, your life has been outlined, and there is a moment and there is a time when your life should end. So he is saying, once he has wound the heart, then it has to beat 60 years. When it stops, all your engagements are canceled. So you are directly dependent on God for life. You are not dependent on anything else. You are directly dependent on God. Therefore, you must find God. Commune with him through Kriya Yoga and meditation, and finish your work on earth. Then you will know what he wants you to do. Then you will know that cosmic plan, the perfect cosmic plan. Then you won't mar the drama of life by your own desires. You think yourself here only for yourself? That is why you are in trouble. I want this, I want that. That is the source of all of your troubles. When you seek money, it takes away all your happiness. If you seek spiritual happiness first, then money will be your slave, as it has been mine. Even at the least desires that I've wished, God has supplied me. I was in San Francisco. I went on a very important errand, and I had gone by train. Some others were with me because I have to carry on the world with me wherever I go. Correspondence from India and from all over the world, I have to keep it up. So I thought, why shouldn't I, as God's child, have a Cadillac car for a little ride? So when I heard $50 a day, I saluted. I said, not for me. Goodbye. I said, Ford is good enough for me. So I had a brand new Ford for $5 a day and had a nice time going around seeing Chinatown and doing all the work that I wanted to do. My movement is for work and pleasure everlasting. I don't seek any pleasure. I have the divine pleasure, conditioned by anything. That's the secret of happiness. That's the secret of happiness. As soon as you say you have to have a car or you have to have this, now I was given money so that I could have hired the car. Instead, I gave it to others for something very useful. Well, when I came back shortly after, a brand new Cadillac was given to me. Now, what is given to me, I couldn't throw away. That is the way it happens throughout. I have seen beyond my dreams that God has given me things. Always, even my slightest wish. And that is true. Why? Because I follow this motto. The bread of men of the world seek after is money. This is your motto, and it is strange. You don't get it. You don't seek money. You seek something else, which money represents, and you have forgotten that thing. It is happiness instead of money that you seek, and happiness includes everything. If you had your motto is happiness, then you would have everything. Jesus said that bread the men of the world seek after. Money, food, and other things of the world seek after. But seek ye the kingdom of God. Seek ye the kingdom of happiness first. Then divine happiness comes by meditation, and all these things will be added unto you. Nor be doubtful mind, because that is true. I started with that little mud hut. People laughed at me. Master is referring here. When he started his first school, he had 7 students, and he was in a little mud hut there that they started with. It's in a little mud hut, and people laughed at me. 15 days, I said, there will be a big palatial school, and there it was. I gave up my job. I was offered $2,000 a month. It was a lot of money in India in those days. I gave up marriage. I gave up a big estate that I would have received as a dowry. And God told me when I asked him, you ask if this is true? You don't trust God. You don't love him. You love everything else. That is why you think God is a bugaboo, sitting somewhere else, and he won't answer you. This is the truth. He will answer to your every move of your life. You can't be without him. Look at the flowers and the weeds. Everything is that eternal life, waves of eternal life. And you are unaware of him because of your desires are concentrated on things, not on the giver. If you are the giver of things, if you are the giver, things are your slave. I have seen that throughout life. So I sought the kingdom of God first, the kingdom of happiness. And God means when you are all the time happy, and that happiness is not an abstract state of your mind, but you feel that happiness is holding you, then you have attained the purpose of life. Then everything is a slave to you. I must tell you a little incident. I went to the graduation of mine to go a long way to Los Angeles, and I said, Lord, I've got to see him. And there are 4,000 students. So I saw one of those men who, with a square cap, I knew him, said, ask him. So I asked him, and he said he knew my nephew very well, but he is a needle in a haystack now and couldn't find him. So I said, oh, why did that happen? But I knew it was a trick of the Lord's. So he said in Sanskrit, best to you, and went away. So somebody was holding my seat. I sat there. Everybody stood up. The band came out, and I was not there. I was with God. I knew when he would tell me, I would get up. Somebody said, the people are coming. Still, I waited. Another person said, just about when they were going to end, people are coming, and I got up. I got the answer. The Lord had told me to get up now, and I went. And there was a huge lady standing in front of me. And I said, Lord, why did you make her huge? I can't see anybody. And there was a little lady and a man in front, and I was trying to go. Somebody said, you can't do it. It's packed. Lord said, I should move on. So I stayed straight there, watching this huge, tall thing in front of me with long black hair. So I said, all right, I will stay here. Once I tried to get up on a chair, well, it was very wobbly. And the Lord said, you will be down. So I said, all right, I'll stand here. Patiently, standing. And just a little while after a man came bolting out, and the Lord said, now, move on. I didn't look. I moved, and in 1 minute's time, he was in front of me. I said, hello, Aaron. And he turned back, and I had 2 mangoes. And they said, I know you shouldn't carry mangoes. And I was right, because I had the mangoes. I could have given them to him. So if I'm not interrupted, everything I saw there, everything was over. Then I forget to tell people to come early. So I chair, and I was there for 1 hour. And this professor was talking the most uninteresting things with his tritone voice. Lord said, now get up. So I went there, and in the corner I was watching. And I said, wouldn't you send this party? So somebody had told my people who had driven me that it would be over at 4:30, but it wasn't over until 6:30. They started late, and I came back driving. Everything you will find guided by that spirit. But first motto must be happiness. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you the reason for it. Why you should seek happiness first. You are between 2 extremes. And their masters launch us into a new topic, so I'm going to stop there. You see what a wonderful personality Master was, so full of life, so full of fun. Loved to tell a story. And through the stories, we get the message. Put God first. Think of God first. That's something that Master did. And his father had offered him a high-paying position with the railway. And Master refused it. He turned it down. He had known that he wanted to be a monk, that he wanted to be sannyas. And so he took on the Swami robes and the Swami vows. And 3 times it had been tried to be arranged that he should be married to somebody. And 3 times he ultimately refused them. He tells one story of when he went back in 1936. And there he met his cousin and the lady who he was supposed to have married at the time. And when she was young, she was very, very beautiful. But as she had gotten older, some of that beauty had faded. Master had noticed. But he had noticed something even less lovely. And that is the way that she spoke to her husband, that she belittled him and put him down all the time. And he seemed to be a doormat that she regularly walked over and rubbed her feet on. And so he took her aside and he said, since we were at one time to be engaged, I feel I have a right to say something to you. And he went on to tell her how she was being disrespectful to her husband and it would not produce any happiness, that she was overfamiliar with him. And as a result, she was destroying his happiness, but also her own. You see, some people are bullies. And when they are bullies, they seek to get advantage over other people. They seem to bluster. They throw temper tantrums, anything to get their way. And they seek out happiness by doing this. But the real result is that you destroy your own happiness, if that is how you're acting. And you are also working at destroying the happiness of those people around you. And so we have to learn these lessons. We have to pay attention. We need to really listen to ourselves to know how we might sound to other people. Many times if you ask others, oh, how do I sound? And we think that we sound fine. And as other people who are harsh, other people who are speaking badly, and we always see ourselves as paragons of virtue, because we don't really see or understand the impact that we have on other people. So Master pulled her aside and talked to her for some time. And I can't help but think that perhaps nobody had ever really told her the truth. Perhaps she did not know how she sounded. And when you go behind the scenes of somebody who's behaving badly, it is almost always that they themselves are unhappy. And it is a cry for help. It is a cry for happiness. But of course, it doesn't produce happiness for anybody. But no matter how much the evidence is that it's producing suffering, they don't change their ways. We get very fanatical about following a certain path towards what we think will take us to happiness. We're not very good scientists. We don't do something, observe the results, and make a judgment thereby as to whether we're being effective or not. We just keep headed right on without any thought that what we're doing might actually be doing the opposite, trying to accomplish. We have to become good observers of ourselves, of others. When we observe others, we can learn from them. When somebody is good at producing happiness in the people around them, we can take note. What is it that they do? They find other people interesting. They respect their boundaries. They have a positive mood about them. What is it that seems to make other people happy? When they walk into the room, they just seem to light up the room. We can pay attention to that, begin to emulate it. And then we can also pay attention to those people who seem to behave badly. And we can pay attention to them and learn from them and say, aha, is there any of me in them? And can I change that behavior? Because I can see how unlovely that behavior is and how it causes suffering for everybody around them and for the individual. So we learn if we are wise, because the wise are always learning. They're always observing. They're always seeing what's going on around them. And this is the way Master was. He was always learning. This is the way Mother was. She was always learning. Mother once said that as long as she was living, she hoped to be learning. Sometimes we think that having God realization is the end of learning. But how can that be when God is infinite? True, we merge our beings into Him and He into us, and there is a oneness. And then it is God's great pleasure to unfold His infinitude before us. All the different things that He loves to share with us, and shows us one scene after another in which we might learn, in which we might serve, in which we might love more greatly than ever before. This is what Master and Mother both wanted to convey to us. Life is remarkable. Life is stunning when we live a truly spiritual life. And you can contrast that there is so much suffering when we don't do our work, when we don't perform our sadhana. Then life becomes painful. But when lived correctly, that pain should remind us of who and what we're really seeking after. That we want God more than anything. When I was young, I used to listen to pop songs still. And if it was a love song, I would convert it into a love song for God. And if it was a "You Done Me Wrong" and crying in my beer song, then that's when Maya betrayed me and I got sucked in. And I missed the boat. And I could convert those songs into spiritual songs in that way. When we convert everything in life to a spiritual lesson, to be observed, to be learned from, then we will truly be on the road towards attaining that perfect kingdom inside. The bread of life will be doing God's will, will be being in communion with God, will be serving Him in all forms. That will be our bread. That will be our meat. That will be our wine. It'll be our everything. And true, we still have to sustain this body as long as we are living. But what we really live by, what we really live for, is for God. The bread, the meat, the wine of life, for the true devotee. So let us celebrate and honor Master's life by going more deeply into his teachings, by understanding his spirit, how alive he was, how much drive he displayed, how passionate he was for God and for service and for gurus. And let us walk in those footsteps. And as he said, you cannot have my realization, Yogananda realization. Besides, I killed that fellow a long time ago. But you can have your realization, your direct connection to God. We're so prone to want to put intermediaries between ourselves and the infinite. And the gurus come for a very definite purpose, an essential purpose for the devotee. And yet, we are to follow them all the way in their teachings, and what they want for us more than anything else is to go all the way to God. So let us not set up Master or Mother or anyone else upon an altar as if that is sufficient. really honoring, really worshiping, really loving a spiritual master, such as mother, is to walk in their footsteps, to realize what they realized, to become what they became, to know what they knew. This is the truth of our beings, and it will free us. And we will know true and lasting happiness, and not mistaken anything else for them, but know that God is that truth. God is that happiness. God is that bliss and that love and that light and that wisdom. O Master, O Master, O Master. May He bless us and lift us ever higher into the kingdom of His heaven. Now let us sit for a few minutes and just be wrapped and absorbed in His presence, in thought of Him, and feel Him moving and operating inside of us as a pure presence of God. Om Namaste Om. Master's blessings be ever upon you.